It started with a quiet trickle behind my backyard, the creek that had always been there, winding peacefully through the neighborhood. It wasn't just a waterway, it was part of the land, part of the reason we chose to live here. But one morning I looked out and saw something I couldn't believe. Trucks, workers, cement mixers, and before I knew it, that living, breathing creek was gone, filled in with concrete by our own HOA. They said it was for erosion control and to protect the homes, but within weeks, the exact opposite started happening. The houses just downstream, nice, quiet homes, began to flood. Lawns turned into mush. Crawl spaces filled with standing water. And the smell, it was like the earth itself was rotting. The very people who were supposed to keep our neighborhoods safe had created a swamp right in the middle of it. I started asking questions. Who approved this? Did anyone even study what would happen if the water had nowhere to go? The HOA didn't have answers. They barely returned calls. And the neighbors? Some were furious. Some were scared. Others didn't even know it was the HOA that did it. What began as a small project to fix nature has now spiraled into something no one can ignore. But the worst part, this might only be the beginning, because what I found next changes everything. Are they hiding something more? Let me show you what really happened. At first, I thought maybe I had missed something, some kind of notice or public meeting. So I dug through old emails, HOA newsletters, even the community bulletin board. Nothing. No warning, no vote, no mention of concrete being poured into the creek. It was like it just happened, quietly, almost like they didn't want anyone to notice until it was too late. I reached out to a few neighbors, the ones who'd lived here for years. One of them, Mrs. Larkin, said the creek used to help drain water from the hills after heavy rains. It always flowed fast, but it never flooded, she told me. Until now. Her backyard, once full of flowers and bird feeders, was now soaked in standing water, the grass yellowing under the weight of constant moisture. Others had similar stories. Basements damp for the first time, mold creeping up walls, sump pumps running non-stop. The odd part? The homes closest to the start of the creek, including a few owned by HOA board members, were totally dry, untouched. That's when things started to feel off. Why did the HOA target just this one stretch of the creek? Why weren't engineers or environmental inspectors involved? I tried filing a request for the project details. It was denied. I asked who voted for the construction. Silence. And then something strange happened. I got a call from someone who used to work with the HOA. What they told me changed everything I thought I knew about this project. The call came late one evening, an anonymous number that I almost didn't pick up. But something about it felt urgent, so I answered. The voice on the other end was low, almost a whisper, as if they were afraid someone might hear. "You don't know the full story," the caller said. "The HOA didn't just fill in that creek to fix the neighborhood. They had another reason." I sat up straight, heart racing. "What do you mean? What are they hiding?" The voice hesitated before continuing. "There's land upstream, valuable land. They've been planning a development there for years. Luxury homes, golf courses, the works. But that creek was a problem. It flooded every spring, and the land couldn't be built on. So they filled it in, made it dry, or so they thought." I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't about fixing the creek at all. It was about clearing the way for a bigger plan, one that put profits over the safety of the people who lived here. But if that was the case, why was everything still flooding? Shouldn't the concrete fix that problem? I dug deeper, trying to find more people who knew something, anyone who could confirm what the caller said. And that's when I ran into Daniel, a younger guy who had just moved here. He had no idea what was going on with the creek, but his new home was already showing signs of damage. His backyard, where the water used to drain, was a marsh. His foundation was cracking. He was angry, but what struck me was his disbelief. He didn't think the HOA could be behind it, until I showed him the first piece of evidence. A letter buried in an old HOA file, hinting at the development project. It was dated years ago. Now, Daniel's not so sure, and with the rest of the neighborhood starting to wake up to the damage, the HOA's silence is getting harder to ignore. But the real questions are still unanswered. Who is really benefiting from all of this? And why does the truth seem so hard to uncover? Something doesn't add up, and every time I think I'm getting closer, the picture becomes even murkier. The more I dug, the more unsettling things became. My inbox was flooded with messages from neighbors, some offering help, others telling me to stop asking questions. But there was one email that stood out. It was from a local environmental group, someone who had been monitoring the creek before it was filled in. They had tracked unusual water levels in the area, but what caught my attention wasn't the data. It was the subject line. Asterisk possible illegal activity near the creek. Asterisk. When I reached out to them, they confirmed what I feared. The creek was never just a natural drainage system. It was protected by environmental laws. Filling it in without proper permits could be a violation, not just of local ordinances, but of federal regulations. But the deeper they looked, the more they found, and that's when the real horror set in. Not only had the HOA filled in the creek without proper documentation, but the land where they had done it. It was registered under a company that had no public record, a company with ties to a few familiar names. It was the HOA's president, Sam Harris. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized the web went deeper than I thought. Sam's name wasn't just linked to the development project. I found a connection to a construction company that was suddenly receiving contracts for landscaping and drainage work throughout the neighborhood. The pieces were all falling into place, but the timing couldn't have been worse. The weather forecast had predicted heavy rains, the kind of downpours that could overwhelm the new concrete structures and flood the entire neighborhood. Everyone was on edge. Tensions were running high, and no one knew when the next storm would hit. That's when I got the call. A local journalist, someone I had spoken to briefly earlier, left me a cryptic voicemail. I found something big. You're going to want to meet. Tonight. I knew what this meant. This could be it. The truth I'd been chasing all along. But I also knew there was a chance I might not like what I found. Something told me this story wasn't just about bad decisions. It was about corruption, and it was bigger than I could have ever imagined. As the skies darkened, I prepared to meet the journalist. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't the only thing brewing in the distance. Something was about to break wide open, and the consequences, they might just tear the whole neighborhood apart. I met the journalist at a dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the windows are always fogged up and secrets seem to hang in the air. He didn't waste any time. "You're not going to believe this," he said, sliding a manila folder across the table. Inside were documents I had never seen before, files that made my stomach drop. One was a contract, signed by Sam Harris, the HOA president, but this time it wasn't for simple landscaping or erosion control. It was for flood mitigation, a plan to redirect water from the creek through a new drainage system that just happened to divert the water into newly developed areas, including the land where the luxury homes were to be built. My heart raced as I skimmed the pages. This wasn't a mistake. This was a strategy. They weren't just filling the creek. They were reshaping the land to force water to flow into neighborhoods, flooding them and driving down property values. But then the bombshell hit. The journalist slid over another piece of paper, an email exchange between Sam Harris and a high-profile real estate developer. They were discussing how the flooding would increase the desirability of the new homes by creating an exclusive waterfront feel. My blood ran cold. They weren't just exploiting the natural landscape. They were manufacturing a crisis. The more the old homes flooded, the more the new ones would seem like an oasis in comparison. As I sat there in disbelief, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Daniel, the guy I had talked to earlier. He sounded panicked. The storm's coming in faster than they said. The HOA's been telling everyone to stay inside. They've evacuated some houses, but I think they're hiding something. The ground's already saturated, and the water's rising. It's bad. You need to see this. I rushed out of the cafe, adrenaline flooding my system. But as I drove back toward the neighborhood, something felt off. Why hadn't the HOA warned the entire community about the severity of the storm? Why were they so quiet? I pulled into the neighborhood just as the first drops of rain began to fall, but instead of the usual evacuation signs, I saw something even stranger. Large construction trucks moving in the opposite direction, heading toward the highest point of the land where the new homes were to be built. My heart sank. Were they already preparing for something, or were they trying to cover their tracks?